What's up? It's Susie from Hey Grill Hey, and today we are doing one of my favorite things, playing with our food. We're separating a whole packer brisket into the flat and the point end. We're smoking this beautiful flat and making these gorgeous candied Kansas City style burn ends. This is a beautiful cook today. I'm gonna walk you through how I did it so you can do the same thing at home. Let's do it. Now, in the world of prepping brisket, there are a million different schools of thought. You have that Central Texas style where they smoke the whole thing all together into a big, beautiful mass of melt in your mouth brisket. In Kansas City, they smoke it whole and then separate during the cooking process to have a lower temp finished flat and then those higher temp finished point ends that just melt in your mouth like beautiful meat candy. And then you have the competition world where they separate your brisket before ever cooking so that they can get the exact doneness they want on the flat, the exact doneness they want on the point to put everything in the box at the exact right temperature. Now we're gonna do almost a mashup of all three styles because we're doing backyard style and I live in Utah, so I think that gives me permission to kind of just do whatever I want. So here's what we're gonna do with our brisket. We are gonna separate the point and the flat from the get-go. If you've never done this before, I think it's worth doing at least once. It'll make you a better brisket cook all around by knowing the actual insides of your brisket and how these two muscles overlap. I'm starting with a whole packer prime brisket. This guy is about 14.5 pounds. We'll probably lose a couple of pounds during the trimming process, but it's beautifully marbled. It's got a really nice bend in it, which means I've got a good fat seam in the middle that will be easy for me to separate the point from the flat. Enough talking. Let's start trimming out this brisket. I'm gonna use a fillet knife. This is my favorite kind of knife for trimming out briskets because it's got this sharp point at the end. It's gonna come in very handy as we're separating these two muscles. Okay, with our brisket out of the package, we can really take a look at the anatomy of this bad boy. We've got this thick bulbous end up here. That is the heavily marbled point end of the brisket. Where it narrows and becomes more even, this is your flat. And there is a seam of fat that runs between the two. We're gonna use the tip of our knife and separate out that fat, but to be able to see the seam, I really like to have it flipped over, fat side down. Whoa, that's heavy with one hand. So you can see the meat on the back side. Now there's this huge, like half moon piece of fat right here. I'm gonna start by taking that off. It'll give me a better look at what's underneath. Now I like to save these big chunks of fat. I actually render my own beef tallow that you can use for tons of cooking purposes. I've got another video about that so you don't waste what you already paid for, but set your trimmings aside. You can definitely use those later. Now that I have that big piece of fat off, we can see these two pieces of muscle. We've got the point on the bottom, the flat on the top, and this river of fat comes up between the two all the way around. And as we turn our brisket on its side, let's flip it this way. You can see there's another river of fat that runs this way. Now this flat comes all the way up to a point right here. Not all briskets do, but with your knife, you can see right here, this is where we start. This is the line, right here is where we start. This is that fat seam right between each muscle. So I'm gonna take my knife and run it in this fat. Anytime you hit muscle, just make some micro adjustments. Make small, tiny, wispy cuts just with the tip of your knife. If you go too heavy or go too deep, you could cut into the flat or into the point. But if you're just making small, little slices, you'll be just fine. I like to use gravity as my friend, so I'll pull back on the flat and let the weight of the point pull down, and that kind of becomes my separation point, so it's really easy for me to see where my knife is gonna go. Now, less talking, just focusing on the trimming. We'll get you some nice close-up shots so you can see exactly what you want it to look like at home. Now you can see as I'm getting further along this separation, I'm kind of rolling the flat back. That way I don't have to hold it the whole time, but I can still leverage the weight to kind of almost peel it away. Now it's getting thinner and thinner as I get to the end of the flat. I'll really just hit a natural separation point where there is no more muscle, it's just fat on fat. Just like that, we've got our point and we've got our flat. I'm gonna do a little bit more trimming on each of these to get them to where I'm ready to season and get them on the smoker. All right, we're gonna start by trimming out the point of this brisket. Now, I don't wanna get rid of all of the fat, I don't think that's necessary, but I wanna take it down pretty far so that you can kind of see the meat through the fat, especially on this underside. We'll flip it over and do the same to the top. In addition, I'm gonna remove this thin flap on the bottom that's just fat. There's really not a lot of meat down there. Our goal is to get this as even as possible so that it cooks as evenly as possible, and it just takes a little bit of knife work. All right, this is where I landed on the back side of the point. Now, a competition cook would probably take this all the way down and leave nothing left, but this is a backyard trim. I feel really good about this. I'm gonna flip it over and just give us a nice like 1/4 inch thick fat cap across the top. You can see this is about 1.5 inches thick, so we're gonna take that down and kind of level out any super thick areas of fat. I'm happy with the trim we got on the point. I'm gonna move my attention over to the flat. The biggest thing that we're looking for here is just evenness in cooking. Similar to the point, we don't want any pieces of fat across the top that are too thick because they really don't render down that well during the cooking process. I'm also gonna trim up, you can see on this kind of tip end right here, it's been cut by the previous butcher. That's fine, I'll trim that off. And these pieces, any pieces that you have from trimming out that are really meaty, I like to put these in gallon zip top bags and freeze them. And then when I kind of build up a couple of pounds worth, I grind them and use it for brisket burgers. They're amazing. This is kind of a situation where you're doing a lot of trim work, but waste not, want not. Save your fat, save your trimmings. You can absolutely repurpose them and use them, and you already paid for it anyway. I'm just gonna start by trimming off some of the excess fat across the top, go around the edges, flip it over, and then do the fat cap on the opposite side. Happy with the back side, going over to the fat cap on the top now. Now we already trimmed a bit of this fat cap down when we took the point off, which is really nice. It did a lot of that work for us. We're just gonna finish this bottom edge where we still have a pretty thick fat cap. Okay, I think these briskets look good. They might not win me a competition, but they're gonna taste amazing, and that's what we're going for with a backyard cook. Next up is our slather and season. I like to slather my briskets with yellow mustard. I think it gives a really great base and binder. I like the way that it helps me develop my bark, and it gives me some really great texture on the outside. So light slather on both sides, and then I'm gonna season pretty liberally with my beef rub, but you can use equal parts kosher salt, coarse black pepper, and garlic powder. My beef rub has a little bit of onion powder in it as well, just for a little extra zhuzh. I like using beef rub as the base because I do like that Texas style flavor profile. However, if you wanted to add a little bit of a sweetness, you could use some brown sugar, some smoked paprika, and go with more of a sweet style rub. All right, once my seasoning is on, I like to use my mustard hand and give it a good slap and kind of press that seasoning into the binder. This also creates some really cool ridges with the mustard. that again is gonna help with that bark development. Gives a lot of those smoke particles something to cling to. We're gonna flip it over, repeat on the opposite sides, and make sure we get the sides as well. All right, our point and our flat are seasoned and slapped. They're ready to go onto the smoker. I've got my smoker preheated to 225 degrees. I'm cooking on a pellet grill today. We're using the Camp Chef Smoke Pro because I have an added firebox where I can influence the cook with additional wood, and I've got post oak chunks going into that firebox to kind of give me that classic Texas flavor. I am gonna be putting these on fat cap up. It isn't super crucial in a pellet smoker, but people always ask. So that's how we're rolling these. I imagine these will be on for about 6 or 7 hours until we hit anywhere between 160 and 170. I'm looking for a really good bark development on the outside before we're ready for our next step. Now, one note as I put these on, I'm gonna do something interesting as I lay them on the smoker. I want my flat to kind of pull out a little bit and kind of squish in the thinner areas. I want to set this up to cook as evenly as possible. Similar to the point, I have a thicker piece on this end and it gets kind of thinner down towards the bottom. I'm gonna scooch the bottom pieces in a little bit on the grill grates and flatten out that thick part so it's really even all the way across. Our brisket pieces have been on for about six and a half hours. Usually this step takes between 6 and 7 hours to get your brisket to an internal temperature between, like I said, 165, 175. I'm super happy because both these pieces are tracking really close to the same temperature, which means we did a great job in trimming them, getting them as close to the same thickness as we could. Now it's time for the wrapping phase. We're gonna wrap each of them in a piece of butcher paper. This is untreated paper. It allows that smoke and airflow to continue to work on the brisket, but it helps retain moisture, and it'll give us a really nice dark bark at the end and really tender, juicy meat. Once these are wrapped, they're going back on the smoker, again, 225 degrees, and we let them roll until we start seeing the internal temperatures that we're looking for. This step usually takes between 4 and 5 hours. So checking temperature on our brisket after the wrapping phase, I'm seeing exactly what I want to see. I want my flat to be clocking between 195 and 200. That'll give me really nice slices without drying it out. I want my point piece to be up above 200 degrees, 200 to 202, even up into the 203 range. Because it was a little bit smaller, we're looking exactly the way that we want to. I've got my point at the higher temp, my flat at the lower temp, and now we're ready for our next steps. Now this bigger piece is my flat. It's got some really great bend. The texture feels nice and tender. I'm gonna leave it in the butcher paper, put it on a baking sheet, and this is just gonna go into my oven. I've got it heated to like 170 degrees. I can even crack the door a little bit. I don't want this cooking anymore, but I do want it to rest and hold, and I want the temperature to come down to a nice slicing and serving temperature, which I really like in that like 160 to 175 range. So that'll hold beautifully in the oven, or you can put this in a cooler with some towels to keep it insulated. Let it rest for at least an hour, which is perfect because I need about an hour to do what I want to do with my point piece. So I'm gonna go put this in the oven, and then we'll come back and cube up our burn ends. Next up, burn ends. Ooh. So I've got my beautiful point piece in here again. Very bendy, very tender. Now I'm gonna buck conventional wisdom a little bit here, and I'm not gonna rest my point before slicing it. I'm gonna slice it and put it immediately into a pan and toss it with brown sugar and butter and barbecue sauce because I want Kansas City style sweet and sticky burn ends. Now if you don't like sweet barbecue, you can just rest these with your flat for the next hour and then cube them up and serve them that way. Also very, very delicious. It's just preference. Look at that. I am thrilled with how that point looks. I'm just gonna cut these into about 1.5 inch thick cubes. Just slice one direction and then the other. Look at that. Oh, yeah, I could probably eat that just as is. This is a lot of self-control to not eat them right now. On the thicker end, I'm gonna cut in half just to give me a little bit more surface area, and then into my cubes. Like butter. My knife is going through this like butter. Oops. Oh, so hot. Oh, hold on. That was a special moment. That was so good. Okay, I got them all cubed. It's time to get them into my pan. Okay, cubes into your pan. Try and get them into a single layer as much as you can. This next step isn't so much about cooking the burnt ends anymore. Remember, we took them up above 200 degrees. They are definitely done. The tenderness is there, the texture is there. This is to layer on flavor at this point. So once we get them in, then I go in with my barbecue sauce. I'm gonna be using my everything sauce. This is my take on a Kansas City style sauce. So it's tomato based with molasses and brown sugar. It'll really give me that beautiful caramelized barbecue color exterior that we're looking for, with a great base of flavor that will go nice with the brisket. Probably about 1/2 cup of barbecue sauce. I'm just gonna eyeball it. I just wanna be able to coat all of them in a nice thin layer of the barbecue sauce without it being overly saucy. And because I want these to be a little bit like meat candy, I'm gonna go in with even a little bit more brown sugar. Just a few tablespoons here, kind of sprinkled across the top. There we go. My final ingredient is just going to be a couple of tablespoons of butter cut into pads and dropped across the top, because what brisket point needs is more fatty goodness. And I figure, you know, butter comes from cows. Brisket also comes from cows, so it makes a lot of sense to put them together. Plus, butter's just delicious. Now this pan is gonna go back on my 225 degree smoker. Again, we're not looking to cook these. I just want that caramelized exterior. So they'll probably take about 45 minutes. I'll go in and give them a stir once the brown sugar and the butter has started to melt to make sure that that is evenly coated across each burnt end. But again, 45 minutes to an hour, 225 degrees, and we will be ready to eat burnt ends and also slice up our brisket flat. With our brisket flat rested, we're gonna open this up and slice it. Our burnt ends are almost done. It's all coming together according to plan. This is always a very scary moment when you cook a brisket, the actual unwrapping. Oh, I think that looks beautiful. We've got a good bend to it. Yeah, that's a pretty good looking brisket. I'm just gonna cut this in slices against the grain. Now, how done your brisket is gonna determine how thick you really slice it. If it's a tighter brisket, you can go thinner, almost deli style slices. That's really what I've seen a lot of in Kansas City. It's kind of those thinner slices. If it's more tender and wants to fall apart on you a little bit, you can go more towards like a pencil level of thickness. So we'll start somewhere in the middle and see how we land. Okay, let's grab this slice. Oh, see, this is a very tender brisket. This one's more towards those pencil slices. We've got a couple pieces that almost want to shred. but it's still got some good pull. Do you see that? Dude, the flavor on there is so good. It's so tender. And even for having that a little bit fall apart texture, it's not dry at all. That's a good brisket flat. There we go. Those end pieces were a little bit more done than this middle piece. It's got a good bend to it. So we can mix it up here in the middle and go a little bit thinner. Our flat is beautifully sliced. I'm gonna pull out our burn ends and make another little pile over here. These look and smell amazing. We hit the end of our cooking and slicing process. Did the smells waft upstairs or something?
No, I just thought you just said you were filming today and I wanted food because I was hungry.
So we had one child realize it was time to eat and he came swiftly to grab brisket. So what are you going for? Will you want sliced flat or a burn end?
Sliced.
All right, you grab your piece. I'm gonna go burn end. I'm gonna try it. Last time I took too big of a bite, so I'm gonna try and control myself a little bit. How's that look?
It's a little hot, but it looks yummy.
Looks yummy? Okay, ready, set, go. Is it good? All right, you guys. What do you think? Did I do okay? Am I an okay brisket cooker?
You're a great brisket cooker.
I got the child's thumb seal of approval. Child's thumbs up, seal of approval. I hope you guys give this one a try at home. If you've never taken a couple extra minutes to trim out a brisket this way, it's worth trying at least once. I think if anything, it'll make you a better brisket cook in the future as you learn how these different pieces of muscle work, how they taste, how they break down, how they tenderize, how they overlap, all of those good things. This is a fabulous learning experience. And at the end, you get to eat really, really yummy brisket. So win-win. We'll see you guys next time.